being hung and they were going to sing. They were singing their death song. They were willing to die for what they believed in. Honorable people. And they pulled the rope and dropped the floor out from under them. And the most massive hanging in the criminal history of this government that occupies our land today took place. And the Mayos, the doctors, came from all over the world to cast lots for those bodies. And Charles Mayo runs the famous Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, won the body of Shakopee. And when the American Indian Movement formed in July of 1968, they were still using Shakopee's skeletal remains for pre-med studies at the famed Mayo Clinic. Little Crow got away. He went into South Dakota, met up with Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and Red Clouds, told him what they did to his people in Minnesota. You better be prepared, you better get organized, because they're coming this way and they're going to wipe you out too. I'm going back this spring, I'm going back to find my people who are still hiding among the Chippewas in the north. All my horses are still there. I'm going to go back and get them. On the 2nd of July, outside of Hutchinson, Minnesota, a little farm town, this farmer and his son were plowing the field, and they looked, and here's these two Indians, father and the son, walking along the woods. And they opened fire on one another. And Little Crow was shot, fatally shot. He was dying. His son dressed him in brand new moccasins for his journey. And he told his son to leave him. So the son took off. And he took Little Crow's body into Hutchinson, Minnesota. On the 3rd of July, they discovered it was Little Crow. There was a $500 reward on him. So 4th of July, they took his body, put it on a big rock in the town square. People came by all day. They put firecrackers in his ears, in his nose, spat on him, clubbed him, and blew firecrackers. That's the way they celebrated the 4th of July. They buried him in a real shallow grave. One of the Minnesota regiment, a drunk, oh, Little Crow is going to be worth money. So he went and dug up Little Crow, scalped him, took his scalp and put it through a little ring like that, took his skull and his arm bones. And sure enough, they put a reward out for Little Crow again, another $500. And that regiment, man from the Minnesota regiment, brought the body of Little Crow into St. Paul, the capital. And they put Little Crow's scalp, they put his head, and they put his arm bones on public display for many, many years in the rotunda of the state capitol so everybody could come in and gawk at him and take pictures. And finally, they removed them. The women spoke out about that again. It's always women that did the talking back then. And they put them in the Historic Society. Right? And the American Indian Movement formed. We started saying we want all of our pipes back, we want our drums back, we want our medicine bundles back, we want hundreds and thousands of skeletons that are all over the world today in museums. The Smithsonian Institute had over 15,000 skulls of our people when the American Indian Movement formed. We want them back. They got all shook up at the State Historical Society. They called a young man, he was working there as a stockman at Historic Society. We want you to take the skull and put it in a safe down in the basement. Take all this information about the trials of Little Crow, the military trials. Take all this information about Abraham Lincoln, hide it, because the American Indian Movement's coming to get it. This young man, he was white as can be, but he was from White Earth. He was a Chippewa. His name was Dr. David Beaulieu today. He was the head of Indian education in Washington, D.C. for many years. At night, when he'd go down and take all that stuff down into the basement, he'd photograph it. Took pictures of Little Crow's skull, his scalp, and his head and his arm bones. Brought all those pictures, put them in a book, come and give them to me and Dennis Banks. Everything I just said is documented at the State Historic Society. And when the Little Crow Uprising was over with, the founding fathers of the state of Minnesota, who just got through on May 11th, celebrating their 150th anniversary, Alexander Ramsey, and Long Knife, they called Sibley Long Knife. They said that the Indian people had to be removed from the borders of the state of Minnesota or totally annihilated. And that's where the scalping policy started in Minnesota by a guy named Long Knife Sibley, one of the founding fathers of the state of Minnesota. The reason why I'm telling this, white America knows nothing. They still cling to this John Wayne, George Armstrong, Custer mentality, frontier mentality. That's why they sit in the stadiums tomorrow, paint their faces red, put little chicken feathers in there, wave rubber tomahawks around. Whoever they're playing tomorrow, when they start getting drunk, they'll start saying, scalp them effing Blue Jays. Massacre them. That's what this mascot is about. It's not the names, it's the behavior that it creates. When 30,000 people sit in the stands in Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, and they start losing, they're getting drunk, they start saying, scalp them twins, massacre them. And all these little boys that come to me with, I take to baseball games, oh, uncle, let's go sit somewhere else. They get scared. All these drunks, they're standing around with war paint on. Sometimes they got headdresses on. Something that's sacred to Indian people. I confront them. And my son and them, they know I'm going to do that. Oh, Dad, come on, let's just go. No. No. I turn right around, I confront those drunks. Ignorant, stupidity. People that are totally scholastically retarded when it comes to Indian people and their culture and their traditional way of life. I confront them. Next thing I know, here comes yellow jackets and police all over the stadium coming up there. I do this quite often during the year in the Vikings when they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs. I have prevailed every single time. Every single time they have to take those drunks and run them out of there, and then shake hands with me and thanking me for calling attention. So it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, and we're going to win. Susan Harjo, who worked for the National Director, National Congress of American Indians, said, we have already won, Clyde. We've already won. So there's been over 14,000 high school, grade school, colleges, universities, towns, Boy Scout troops, rivers, streams, lakes have all changed their name today. We've already won. We've won the struggle because of people like you. A few people that are willing to stand up and demand the truth and demand that something be done. When I was growing up as a little boy on my reservation, my father was a First World War veteran. He was a Marine. There was 50,000 warriors enlisted in the First World War. They didn't enlist because they wanted to go over there and fight and kill, defend the so-called democracy. They went over there to get out of that brutal educational system, to get away that starvation policy of the federal government. My father enlisted out of Carlisle, 16 years old. He was one of the first Marines to land over there. And his story is the story of every person that went across the water. Came home with 17 machine gun wounds, gassed and bloated. He was shot 17 times in a German camp. When the Allied forces came in, he covered himself with dead bodies. They gassed him. He bloated up, covered himself up with dead bodies. When they were loading the trucks up, they found my dad, a few others that were still alive. And he came home, 1918. 1924, the Congress of the United States of America declared us citizens. Huh? Ain't that nice? Don't we have a nice government? Huh? Decided to allow us to be citizens in our own country. That was my father. He used to sit at the window every night when there was a storm, and the lighting would be in the west. He'd be ducking. I'd get up 3:05 in the morning to go to the toilet. My father would be sitting there ducking every time there was lightning. Every time there was thunder, he was hiding. He lived like that all of his adult life for this country, who finally allowed him to be a citizen. In 1978, the American Indian movement walked the length and breadth of America, all the way from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. There was 24 bills pending before the Congress of the United States of America to terminate Indian people altogether. So we set up the longest walk. We lobbied every ministerial society, every college, university, every mayoral society, in every city, labor unions, college students. Pretty soon we were addressing state legislators all the way across America. Every tribe, every nation supported us. And when we got to Washington, D.C., we killed every single one of those bills. Were dumped. But we also lobbied for the Indian Religious Freedom Act. And it wasn't until 1978, from 1890 to 1978, that we're not allowed to sing, not allowed to pray, not allowed to speak our language, not allowed to go along here, not allowed to teach our children about our culture and our way of life, never allowed to pray. Jimmy Carter signed that law in September of 1978 to allow us to pray again, sing, dance in our old traditional way. Is that a wonderful government? Huh? Isn't that the wonderful government came here to seek religious freedom, got everything they wanted for Indian people, and decided to give a little bit back? My mother was taken off the streets. I shouldn't say streets because we didn't have streets, paths, gravel roads and white earth when she was 9 years old. Like hundreds and thousands of other Native women, little boys, 9 years old, she was taken off the streets, put in a boarding school, Flandreau, kept her for 9 solid years. Like hundreds and thousands across America, all of our aunties, all of our mothers, all of our grandmothers, all of our grandfathers, our uncles, every one of them went through that, not just her. Kept her there for 9 solid years, never allowed to go home and even visit. Murderers and rapists don't spend that much time in jail. They kept her there. As a little boy, my mom, when her legs would always swell up with her when there was bad weather or something. Hey, Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong with your leg? Oh, don't ask so many questions. It's just the weather. It's arthritis. Just a young woman. Late at night, we'd hear people come, and she'd think all of the children upstairs sleeping. Old Lady Smith and Mrs. Big Bear would come over to the house. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. I'd be laying there awake, knew they were coming. I heard them come there 2 or 3 times a week. They'd greet one another in this strange language, Ojibwe language. Welcome one another into the house. They always have coffee and sandwiches and cookies ready for them. They sit around a table and they would tell stories in this strange language that I never heard before. And they would laugh so hard, sometimes they would start crying. They'd laugh so hard they'd fall right off the chair. Then the alarm clock would go off. time to go to school, everything was English again. Mom, Baker, not just me, my sisters, my brother. Mom, we heard you last night. You were having such a wonderful time. You were so happy. Why don't you teach us that language and those stories? Oh, forget about it. That's the past. Forget about the past. Think about the future. She said, go to school. Study hard. Who knows? You might be president someday, huh? How many of us have been told that? Huh? Every one of us have been told that. That's what she'd tell us.